Chapter 5. Amelia. It's been almost 3 weeks since my insemination and I am not quite sure how I had made it those past weeks without attempting to shoot myself. I can barely sleep or eat, and anytime I try to close my eyes I am instantly reminded of what a terrible person I am for considering selling my first child for money. Let's say for the past hour, I have been sitting at the dining table stabbing at the food on my plate. I don't know what it is I am eating, but I know one thing: it tastes disgusting. Getting up, I grab the leftover on my plate and place it in the fridge, deciding to eat it later. I was about to make it back to my room when my phone suddenly began to ring. I pull it out of my pocket and looked at the caller ID. Oh, if isn't the devil herself, Mrs. Gray. I battled myself whether or not to answer it because I really didn't want to speak to her, but at the end she will always win because she literally owns me now. Hello. I answered with a lot of venoms filled in my voice. Meet me at Cafe Corazza 3N in 5 minutes. She said emotionlessly, and before I could reply she hung up. Ah, I hope she shocks on her rich people's coffee before those 5 minutes come. I ran my hand through my hair. I barely even know her and she's already bringing out the worst in me. I walked over to my closet and began ransacking through it looking for something appropriate to wear. In the end, I went for something simple like a white V-neck shirt and a black jean. I tied my hair into a bun, wore my flats, picked up my bag and made it out the door. Thankfully the weather wasn't so cold. I walked across the street and pulled up a cab. I got in. Cafe Corazza 3N. I said to the driver. Cafe Corazza 3N is a popular expensive coffee shop few blocks away. The driver nodded understanding. I leaned back and stared out the window. After a few minutes' drive we made to the coffee shop. I paid the driver and got down from the car. Through the glass window I could see Mrs. Gray slowly sipping to her coffee like she had no care in the world. I rolled my eyes and made it inside without saying a word. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Miss Clark. I murmured. What would you like? She asked, signaling a waiter over. You clearly can't afford a place like this, so it's on me. I rolled my eyes at her vagueness. Latte. She lifted her hands to the waiter as an indication of duplicate orders. The waiter nodded and left before she turned back to me. Any signs of pregnancy yet? She asked, taking her eyes to my stomach. Not really, I mean, I threw up yesterday. Other than that, nothing. She nodded. That's a good start. Is there a particular reason why we are meeting here and not at the office? I asked, attempting to go straight to the point. I can't bear any more seconds with her. Damien is still insisting on meeting you. Last night he threw a huge tantrum. She said, probably trying to get me to feel sorry for her. The waiter returned with our orders. There was a bout of silence as he placed the cups in front of us. Mrs. Gray immediately grabbed her cup and began sipping it. After taking several sips, she puts the cup down and look up to me. He insists on seeing you. Taking a deep breath, I spoke up, but in a more softer tone this time. Why are we here? I asked, but with a hint of attitude in my voice. She leaned forward. To remind you of your contact, Miss Clark. She dropped her cup. You know, my son Damien is a way of compelling women with his charms, and before they realize it they are completely wrapped up around him. I cut in. Your point? Just stick to the reason I hired you, Miss Clark, and make sure you don't get distracted. She said, and I almost threw up in disgust at her words. Like I would ever want anything with such a stuck-up family, not to mention her son Damien. Don't worry, Mrs. Gray, I would never be interested in your son. I shot, making sure the disgust was eminent in my voice. She chuckled slightly. Very well then. She said as she stood up. I will send the driver to pick you. Chapter 6. Amelia. The next day at noon the driver came to pick me up at exactly noon as Mrs. Gray had said. I sat patiently at large living room waiting patiently. Mr. Gray will see you now. A lady in blue and white uniform informed. I nodded and gathered myself up. This way please, she said, gesturing me towards a black door, and without saying a word she grabbed the handle firmly and pushed the door open. Go in. I stepped in and my eyes swept through the room. I gasped impulsively at its enormity. The room is like a perfect magazine cover. The king-sized bed had cream shirts inlaid with a fine green silk, leaves embroidered so delicately that they might have landed there in spring and just sunk in. but I know they took hundreds of hours to sew. The white curtains are linen, the kind of white that is untouched by hand. Then my eyes land on a man standing and staring out the window pane. There were 2 male nurses standing beside him like human robots. "Sit," he ordered without taking his eyes off the pane. A flash of fear passed through my spine at the intensity of his voice, and without saying a word I sat on the empty couch quietly. There was a deep silence in the room. You could clearly hear a pin drop. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice breaking through the silence. "Amelia." "You're Italian?" he asked, his voice pitching with curiosity. "Partly Italian, my mom is Italian and my dad is American," I said, not sure where this conversation is heading. I mean, the guy has not even looked at me or taking his eyes off that pane. "Mrs. Gray said you wanted to talk," I said, hitting straight to the point. Any more second in here and I would completely lose it. Silence. "Are you pregnant yet?" he asked. "I don't know, I haven't done the test yet," I said. "Why not?" For someone who wasn't so thrilled about the idea, he sounds really optimistic. "I don't know," I answered. "I thought you didn't want it?" I shot back. "I don't especially." He starts but cut himself off in the middle. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "What exactly? Why are you a surrogate?" he asked, his voice filled with disgust. I began, but he cuts me off. "I have been really curious as to why anyone could go into such a business. Do you have any self-respect? Are you a gold digger? You couldn't just get a simple job, you had to settle for something as belittling as this." He snapped. I felt a sharp shooting pain pass through my heart at his words. "I needed the money," I said, embracing myself. He scoffed. "Pathetic, you could make money from anything else and yet you choose this? You clearly are a gold digger, and with what I am sensing, a truly desperate one." He spat bitterly. "Where does she pick them from?" he muttered under his breath. "Say something, Amelia, bark at him, scream, do something. Anything is better than being quiet and saying nothing. You can't let him talk to you like that." My inner voice screamed as I listened to him go on, but I felt my guilt taking a bigger part of me, tears threatening to escape. "He doesn't know anything about me. He has no right to judge me or belittle me like this. You don't know anything about me?" I choked out. He scoffed and turned, but his eyes were looking in the opposite direction. He moved slightly, and in a flash, the male nurses rushed and held to him, leading him slowly to the bed where I was. "Something just wasn't right about him. Get out," he boomed, suddenly startling me. Without saying a word, I picked up my bag and stormed out the door. Once I was out of the room, I shut the door behind me and sunk down against the wall, letting out all the tears I held in. I wasn't crying because of how cruel he said those words to me. I was crying because I knew he was right. I don't know how long I sat there crying, but it felt like forever. "Miss?" a voice called, and I instantly wiped my tears and looked up. "I am sorry, I will take my leave." I got up. "Don't let it bother you, dear," I sobbed. "Huh?" She smiled. "You've been sitting there and crying for quite some time," he clearly. Chapter 7. A week later. Amelia. I am done. No child should be subjected to such a toxic environment. I yelled to Amber from the shower. She was wiping her makeup off in the other side of the bathroom. You should have seen how cold and rude he was to me, not to mention he didn't even look at me once, like I repelled him or something. She sighed. "I told you it won't be easy. The Greys are known to be very arrogant and selfish. I warned you, but you wouldn't listen," she said, and I pulled the curtains aside to look at her. "I know, I should have listened to you, and I am sorry. I was so clouded with the money and I avoided everything else." She smiled weakly. "So what's the plan? Are you still doing this or not?" "I don't know," I said, getting out the shower and wrapping a towel around my body. I reached into my drawer and pulled out my jammies. "We need to find out if you are pregnant. That's the only way we can get you out of this mess," Amber said. I nodded hysterically. "What if I am?" She bit her lips. "That's another way of saying then you are screwed. The test is in my purse," I said. She nodded and walked out the bathroom to get. I slid into my jammies and sat on the clothes slid off the toilet. Taking a deep breath, I closed my eyes, attempting to control my racing heart. "Please don't be pregnant," I prayed. I opened my eyes instantly as I heard footsteps approaching the room. Amber walked in with the test in her hand. "Here." she said, handing it over to me with shaky hands. I took it from her. Do you need me here? She asked. I nodded. I definitely can't do this on my own. Here we go, I whispered under my breath. 3 minutes later. My patience seems to be wearing out. My anxiety seems to be reaching to its maximum as I paced agitatedly around the bathroom. Calm down, Em. How? I scoffed. How the hell was I supposed to stay composed now? My entire life could be over in a minute. I thought I could do this. I thought I could strong for mother, but it turns I can't. I am weak and apparently very stupid to think I could pull this off. How long? I asked. A minute more. Hey, she muttered, making me stop and look at her. Whatever happens, it would be fine, she said with a reassuring smile. How could she be so composed in a moment like this? Oh, I forgot I am the one whose life is being ruined, not hers. Would you like something to drink to calm yourself first? She asked, and I shook my head. She smiled before looking down at her watch. It's time, Em. I let out a huff of breath. Can you? Yes, of course. My heartbeat began to accelerate as I watched her move to the other side of the room where the test was. I chewed my lips agitedly as she turned back to me with an impassive expression on her face. What happened, AMB? Silence. AMB. She opened her mouth to speak and closed them back up again. No, 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 I yelled out, snatching the test off her hand. It's positive. It's positive. No. A sudden loud scream was heard in the room, and it took a while before I realized it was coming from me. Amber rushed and held to me. Calm down, Em. Don't fucking tell me to calm down. I snapped. It's not your entire life that's being ruined right in front of your eyes, so don't you fucking tell me to calm down, I said, choking at the end. She placed her hands on my shoulder, turning me to her. I mean, it's not too late. For what? I shot back. I am pregnant, AMB. My entire life is over now, don't you get it? I cried. She shook her head. It doesn't have to be, Em. You can get rid of it. Wait. What? Get rid of the baby, Em? I know someone that can help take it away without any complication whatsoever. She explained like it was the easiest and the most normal thing to do in the world. I can't. Why not? It's the perfect plan. You can't possibly take care of a baby right now. The Greys, they would sue me. They don't have to know. Tell them the procedure failed, make up a story or something. She said and held my hand, giving it a tight, encouraging squeeze. It's like you said.